in medicine, women's sexual health is not prioritized. Independence, right? Independent woman, yes, but also the United States is set up to be like being an individual over a collective, like no matter what the cost, and the cost is women's health. You know, those same chemicals brought to you by doctors who said don't worry about it because there's no research to show they're bad, and now here I am as a grown adult being like, wow, why do we have to keep doing dumb? Never, okay, as a hormone doctor, I would never recommend oral estrogen, never. We're waiting for disease. Like, let's wait for disease and then we can diagnose and then we can treat. Why do we have to keep waiting until things are so bad to finally like say, oh yeah, maybe we should be cautious about it?
Oh my God, for you with PCOS and endometriosis, by the time you get to menopause, it's just going to be a huge relief.
I wish.
If only,
oh
right?
my God. I feel like the reason why it's progestin is not progesterone is you cannot patent a natural substance. And in the United States, one of the biggest things that we have is patents. And so progestin, it was actually made in Mexico, in a lab in Mexico, and then it was brought into the pill formulations, and that allowed them to patent these drugs. And so to understand that, like, it wasn't put in there because it was like the best thing. It was the thing that allowed for a return on investment from the pharmaceutical companies who, for the first time in history, got to give a drug to somebody who never had a diagnosis. All they had to do was be born with a set of ovaries.
Scary, so scary. When you're looking at this, and you're testing women, I know you talk about the Dutch test actually in your book. I often look at that. You can see variances as well, though, when you compare the Dutch test to when you're looking at serum testing in terms of levels, like estradiol can look good on one and then not on the other. Can you just explain a bit about that and what you tend to use in terms of like prescribing those bioidenticals and what women should be talking to their doctor about in terms of testing?
Yeah, so it's something that you'll find a lot of providers and even pharmacists, when you talk to them, they don't necessarily hang as much on testing as they do symptoms. And I think that is because we just, like, serum testing hasn't always been the best in terms of catching this. With the Dutch test, if you're on bioidentical progesterone, it's not really going to tell us much with that. And in fact, like, we really have to go off symptoms with progesterone. Why I like to run the Dutch test is I want to see the metabolites. I want to see what you're doing with your estrogen. And I think, so a lot of times, you know, the Dutch test is going to be that 5 to 7 days after ovulation, what a lot of doctors say, day 19 to 22 of your cycle. But as we talked before we even started recording, is that not a lot of people are actually having 28-day cycles. So keep that in mind. It really needs to be 5 to 7 days after ovulation. That is when your natural progesterone will be at its highest, and that we'll be able to look at all of that. But when it comes to the bioidenticals, like I said, the Dutch test isn't going to be where it's at for the progesterone. The metabolites, however, with estrogen are super, super helpful, because if you are pushing everything into 16-hydroxyestrone, I know that your breasts are probably going to get lumpy and bumpy and swelling if we start giving you estrogen, if we're not addressing that pathway. If it's the 4-hydroxyestrone, we could have a problem with DNA damage. And if we have a problem with DNA damage, that equates to cancer in the future. That's problematic. So we want to be looking at, like, how can we come in? How can we intervene? The other thing I like about the Dutch channel, we haven't even talked about this, right? We've just been talking ovaries. Love them, like, love the hormones from them. However, your adrenals are everything when you go into menopause. This is why I'm like, sleep, lifestyle, diet, saying all of that, because, you know, I talk about this pyramid so much, and I put it in, is this normal? The foundation of your hormone period, or your pyramid, so let me say my words right, is your adrenal glands and insulin. And if those two things are not right, we expect your thyroid hormone and your sex hormone, those are not going to be right either. And that is your foundation in healing your hormones for good. That is your foundation for having great hormones through your whole life. Once you are in menopause, the adrenal glands are going to produce DHEA. There's a big significant portion of our testosterone coming from our adrenal glands. DHEA can make testosterone, but then it can also go into estrogen. So you're not done just because your ovaries are done. You're not done with all of your tissues making estrogen. When we know, like, bone cells, fat cells, like, they're going to make estrogen too. But your adrenal glands, we really need to understand where stress is at, because, like, I could be giving you bioidentical hormones, and let's say I'm like, oh yeah, your anxiety is bad, and like you're having you're having this night waking and all that stuff, but I'm not looking at your cortisol. I'm not looking at your cortisone. I'm not looking at your epinephrine, norepinephrine output. Like I need to see that because that's a big piece of the puzzle. I can't do that on serum. If I think you have Addison's disease, I'm going to be like, oh, which is like adrenal insufficiency. And that I'm going to be like, let's run, all of these markers. But otherwise, I can't really do this 4-point throughout the day. How are you looking? The Dutch now has the cortisol response. Like when you wake up, is your cortisol spiking the way it should? That pattern, especially if you're a mom or if you're an attorney, oh my God, the number of attorneys or you're a doctor, or like, there's just like that pattern tends to get thrown off. Okay. So like, anyone who's gone through grad school, like you have a pattern of a college student for so long that you have been up at night studying and skimping on sleep and all that. If you are a mom, you have a baby that's like night wake, you're not supposed to sleep like that, baby. Like, come on. Well, the baby is, but I'm not supposed to, right? I say this as I now have a 17-month-old. And so with that, what we can see is that cortisol is not spiking in the morning and it's actually coming up in the evening. Well, maybe it's a progesterone issue, or maybe it's actually your cortisol is an issue. Maybe it's a testosterone issue with energy in the morning. Maybe it's a cortisol issue, or maybe it's a cortisol, thyroid, and testosterone issue because spoiler, hormones are rarely just one thing. And so that's why I like to look at Dutch, because I want to see the whole panel. Dutch doesn't do thyroid, so I'm going to have to do serum anyways. And it's not always economical for everybody to do a Dutch panel. So, and it may be something that like their insurance isn't going to cover bioidentical. So I'm like, okay, what basis do we need to cover with serum work that we can get with that? And then we can do the best we can with meeting people where we're at. Because honestly, like I hate that finances have to be part of like dictating how we do medicine. And yet it's a very real reality of some things we have to consider, that like this is just not economical for people to do a Dutch panel, get on bioidenticals, do all of that. And people still deserve to feel amazing and live a really healthy and full life.